Welcome to Life by Design, episode 320. Welcome to Life by Design. I'm your host, Dr. Jamie Richards, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Dr. Horatio Jug.
Always happy to be here.
Yes, we are creators of Life by Design with many locations worldwide. Each week on the show, discuss the principles and the practice of Life by Design. Today, Horatio, we're talking about how everything is awesome and no one is happy.
To quote the Louis C.K. thing.
Yes, if you haven't seen that, maybe I'll put that in the show notes, and you can go check that out because it's a pretty funny bit from the Conan O'Brien show, and it's pretty popular. It's been seen many, many millions of times. So I'm sure if you're listening, you might have seen it. But essentially, in a nutshell, he tells the story of how amazing the world is at this time. You have people flying across the world on a plane that they couldn't do that 100 years ago. People, the internet, people being able to send messages on their phone instantaneously, and yet still disappointed, upset. And he's using the examples in this bit of, somebody trying to send, say, a text message, and they're ticked because they can't send the text message. He's like, dude, it's got to go to space.
Give it a second.
It's got to go to space, right? The trips that we would make in 3 hours on an airplane today, people would take across the country on a horse and buggy, and people would die.
We'd arrive with a whole different set of people.
Right, exactly. And so it's true. There's so many things about life, the world today. Sure, I think you can focus on the negative, and obviously that's what a lot of people tend to do. You've seen different research that talks about simply because of the uptick in the media, uptick in access, that our awareness of things that happen around the world is very different than it was 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. So of course, out of sight, out of mind. It's not to say that those things are entirely different. It's now that we know more about them. So it draws our attention. And of course, in an attention, thirsty environment, we're constantly consumed by everything that's out there. And of course, everything is also available for us to create the life that we want if we're not happy, and start to reverse engineer this life that we would like to create, this dream life, if you will. And yet it seems like, and I don't have the numbers right in front of me or the research necessarily to provide exact support of this, but it seems like people are less happy than ever before. And it just seems to me that it's almost, I don't want to say unacceptable, because of course everybody has different situations and everybody has their own stuff that they have to go through, but accessibility is there. The ability to figure things out and create the life that we want, it's right at our fingertips more than ever before.
Totally agree. And of course, there's lots of underlying principles to this. And I disagree. I think there's good numbers. I think when you look at the mental health statistics, the increase in depression and anxiety, the increase in severity of those problems, the increase in suicide rate among, kids who have nothing, in my opinion, nothing but potential for their lives. We see those numbers going up. And again, I get the counter argument. Oh, it's because other things we're living longer and other things are being cured and healed. I totally understand. But I'm just basing it on personal experience, the conversations that I've had, the things that I read, the people I interact with. People experience bouts of happiness, but for somebody to say that they're happy, it's not something that I see.
Yeah, we could spend time going into some of the data and research, but I think it is there to support that. What's causing that? What's the, primary reason? I know that in speaking to different people, not just healthcare providers, but I meant to say teachers and educators and people who are spending a lot of time with younger people, they would say, or at least have said to me, exposure to more material, exposure to I don't want to say the internet, but you know what I mean? Digital access, it's changed the landscape a lot. And so, I think that's changed, decade after decade after decade. I'm sure the things that people had exposures to in the 20s were different than at the turn of the century, and then in the 40s and the 60s and so on. So I think we're just in a regular cycle, and it changes I don't know that that's enough to say that's why. And I'm sure every generation that's gone through this, they've always had their thing, their reason, whether it was, rock music, right? You think about the same type of change at the time as the music. That was, what was causing problems.
The television.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I mean, again, it's hard to pinpoint. I know that there's many causes to this, but I think the one that we should spend time talking about is one that we've personally experienced. And it's the idea that somehow your happiness is out there somewhere, waiting for you to, I'm looking at, we're having family over and Rochelle made these little brownies, it's not like it's a brownie out there waiting for you to pick up and take. Happiness is an emotive state. And in order for you to, find the source out of your emotions, you're going to have to spend some time, thinking and looking at your nature and human nature in general, because human nature has not changed. The requirements of human living and what humans need to be mentally and psychologically successful has not changed since the dawn of humanity. The external environments have changed. I would agree that there is more pressure today than there was, even 50 years ago. So there's definitely risks and pressure, but it's the answer lies on the inside. I remember being in high school, and again, I think it's funny that I think the way that my parents voiced their opinion on this, is part of the problem that we need to chat about. Like, so for me, there's no question after high school, I was going to university. Like, that was whatever else we could talk about. We did not talk about that university was the next step. Like, forget the fact that maybe I didn't want to go. Forget the fact that maybe it wasn't the right choice for me. Forget the fact that, maybe I wanted to do something else. And it's really funny. I look back. I remember one time I was playing video games and my dad came downstairs and he's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm just having a rest." He's like, "Well, don't rest too long. There's books that need to be read and exams that need to be completed for you to have a life." And it's funny that now in 2019 and the internet came along and, now there's esports and there's kids getting paid a decent wage to play Street Fighter and Madden football, right? So you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
But the pressure was there, at the time. And it's funny that we're raised in these environments when, this is the way that it's going to be, but we don't spend a lot of time looking at what's on the inside of us and what actually motivates and it's going to get us moving and being happy.
Well, that's, not to say that we're unique in this perspective, but that's our different perspective on this topic. A lot of times the focus is on the external. So, digital access, bullying, the environment. And of course, I think those things are still important, but the unifying factor here is that the most controllable of all of these is you, and it's the internal. And so, you always look at success across different avenues and different, people. And of course, there's lots of people that are exposed to the same circumstances, the same environment as people who are having, a specific challenge that have found a way to overcome it. And so to me, that provides hope. It provides hope that, being able to manage the current environment, being able to be happy is accessible because somebody's doing it. And now, whether it is the bulk of people or not many people, that doesn't really matter at this point. The fact is that once something has been done and somebody's showing that there's a way to do it, then clearly there's a way to do it. And part of the Think by Design model is getting back, or at least focusing in on this idea that, there is a blueprint to develop psychological health. There's a blueprint to meet the requirements for a healthy mind. And of course, then the emotional state that comes along with that, which is happiness. And I think that's an important topic to talk about, Crayshaw, is this idea that you already talked about, a happiness being an emotive state, but happiness is the outcome. It's a reward, if you will, for, I think it's stated no better than this idea that happiness is the result of pursuing your values. And I've seen that in my own life, that as long as I know what my values are, and I'm spending my time pursuing them, that I'm extremely happy. And it's only when, for whatever the circumstances are, I get away from pursuing my values or I make choices that would be a sacrifice to my values. Those are the times when I'm least happy.
Yeah, you've definitely said, and I mean, there's really a mouthful. I'm not going to be able to get everything out all in one shot, but I mean, yeah. So like, what are your values? We live in a society where we pay lip service to this idea of the individualist, of people that are successful, of people who dare to be bold enough to follow something that makes them selfishly happy. But we don't really support these ideas. There's commonalities in our culture, and there's commonalities in every culture. The idea that other people's happiness is more important than your happiness, and that somehow being a good person means only helping. God forbid you would want to help somebody yourself, but your standard for happiness is helping other people. So then, of course, right? Like, how can you discover your values when you grow up thinking that other people's opinions are more important? When are you ever going to introspect and say, why don't I figure out what makes me happy? No. You're too busy following what society tells you that you should be following. You need to, like my parents, you need to go to school, and you need to start a family, and you need to get a secure job. And then when you have all these things taken care of, then if you have extra time, then you can follow these little side projects of yours, that can make you happy. Like and again, I don't think the blame necessarily falls all the time on the individual when culture's made it such a difficult, impossible standard. We can all agree that selfishness is terrible. God forbid you ever want to do something for yourself. Even though we pay lip service, like, oh, make sure you fill up your own cup before you can do anything for other people. When we talk about these things, but when push comes to shove, it's really hard to start to apply some of these principles in your life, because you're going to have to go against a lot of the stuff that just was never questioned when we were being taught and when we're growing up. And we see the same bromides being taught today to the kids. It's the same things being repeated over and over again. So it's not a shocker to me that we're creating a similar stressful environment and we're not happy with the outcome that we're getting.
Well, this is possibly a side tangent, but it could open up an interesting conversation. Do you think that younger people, getting into, say, the teens, and part of that, cliche, but part of that rebellion that is, seen as a phase of being a teenager is really just, pushing back against this idea of not being able to pursue their own values?
It's hard to say because I haven't studied this. I know that. I know there's like the rebellion. So as I'm thinking on my feet, what you're acting against versus what you're thinking, the actual ideas, are two very different things. Like, remember, if this really happened, then there would be a different society. If teenagers actually pushed back and held the belief against their parents, then eventually we would see things change. But these ideas that we're talking about, that selfishness is bad. These are the deep-suited, rooted things that nobody really questions, right? Like me coming home and playing Nirvana at like top level when like my parents hated that music isn't really a rebellion. Like, we're not fighting among, like, it's not really a fundamental discussion over what we're actually fighting. It's just I'm doing things that my parents hate to spite them.
True. Well, I guess right. I'm thinking more in the sense that, you look at, we'll use millennials as an example, but, millennials having kids much later in life, having multiple different jobs, trying out different things as they kind of move forward. I wonder if that's part of this. If we push against this in our children, this idea that they need to follow what we say, they need to put other people first. The millennial generation has said, and I think there's a second part of this that I want to mention, but they've said, well, no, we're going to come first. I'm going to focus on myself. It looks to me like they're actually doing more of this, but the problem is the way that it's showing up. And so I wonder if they're actually nailing this idea of rational selfishness to a degree, but I feel like maybe their virtues and character traits in the way they play this out are maybe not flawed as probably the best word, but it ends up coming off, really rubbing people the wrong way, right? And I think that's why people have that relationship and that stereotype of millennials being selfish. Of course, people who have come and gone in generations before look at that as a negative, but I wonder if, we could be selfish but still be good people, right? I think those two things are often looked at as opposites, that if somehow you're selfish, you've got to be, a really mean person. You've got to be super against everything that doesn't have anything to do with you. I think you can actually have great virtues, be a great person, have great character traits, and still be rationally selfish.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's the most appropriate way to be. And it's always hard to talk about a whole generation of people when there's no such thing really as a generation. It's just a nice way to classify things so we get it. What I've seen from people that would be classified as millennials is they have a burning desire to do something. I don't see them questioning the major ideas of society any more or less than our generation or the generation before that would have done. I don't see it. I do see material things mattering less to them in general. But I don't know. I think the way that they're pursuing the immaterial things is along the same standards or philosophy or principles that every other generation before them has come. You putting off kids because you want to travel, but then when you have kids, you enact all the same values that you had and that you've been taught, is not questioning the values of your society.
Right. Well, I guess my thought process is I wonder if they're actually doing what we're suggesting, but then coming back around to following the values that were put upon them for whatever the reason is, whether it's pressure or this idea that, okay, this is just a break in time where I'm going to pursue my own life. And then once I pursue my own life long enough, then I'm going to go and I'm going to put everybody else first and do all those things I was supposed to do.
Maybe. I mean, I'm sure that for some people that applies. Like, it's hard, right? Like, I don't like the idea of trying to pinpoint one behavior on like millions and millions of people. It's
well, I think we've got challenging. We got a little off topic, but it's interesting because it leads me to the final piece, and that's the segue. And what I was getting at is it's almost as if that category, quote unquote, of people and lots of other people, have at least address one of the bigger challenges. As much as we want you to be introspective and identify your values, the next piece of this is actually putting them into action. And that's the hard part, right? It's, applying things. So in the pre-show, we talked about people say who want to lose weight, who want to change their body, who want to, increase their financial abundance. All that stuff is things that people want. Of course, maybe you finally get to the point where you recognize it's a value for you and you want to do it. So you've solved problem number one, which is great. But then problem number two is you get stopped because, you don't take the action steps. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Oh, well, I wanted to have this change in my life, but it didn't happen. Oh, well, what did you do? Well, nothing. I just wanted that change to happen, but it didn't happen. So obviously that's not meant to be for me, or I don't know how to do it, or, I'm never going to be successful. And I think the cycle continues even after people identify their values.
Or even worse, hating that value as such and condemning other people who want to pursue it because you can't do it.
Right.
And we see this with, it's funny that you bring up the millennials. I've read, and I'm not speaking of a generation, but I've read many blogs written by young people, hating money, hating business. And they're all, and because I've investigated, they're people who have tried to achieve these things and failed.
Right.
So it's a slippery slope. It's dangerous.
Yeah. Sounds super old, Kreisho.
I am. I've realized.
I've read these blogs from these young people. Get a haircut, hippie.
Exactly. And the young kids are going to listen to this. If of the three listeners that we have, the young kids are going to be like, listen to these two old guys. They don't know what they're talking about. And the cycle continues, right?
Yes. Well, let's hope we can break the cycle on some people to some degree. And I know that's always been our passion at Life by Design. We've seen it with lots of the families that have gone through our practice and people who listen to the podcast and send us messages every day. I'd like to say there's more than 3 people, unless it's the same 3 people sending me messages every week with feedback from the podcast. But I think it's gone beyond that.
Listen, man, it's hard. Like there's nothing simple about this that we're advocating. Like this isn't easy. There's no quick fix. There's no pill. There's no surgery. There's no injection. There's no website. There's no blog that you can go read that all of a sudden you're going to do those things.
That's right.
And happiness is magically going to come to you. I'm really sorry if somebody has sold you that idea. That's really just not the way that it works. Yeah. And this is to bring it home full circle before you wrap it up. This is exactly what we've been talking about. Like it's intellectual. I get you understand the intellectual concept of I want to find what makes me passionate and pursue these things. But when it comes time to actually putting it in practice and having a conversation with your wife or having a conversation with your dad or having a conversation with your children or having a conversation with the bank or selling your house or doing these things, right, that push back against, oh my God, I don't want to sell my house to pursue my passion. Everyone is going to think I'm a failure, right? Now it becomes serious. Now it becomes really, really hard. And I mean, we recognize that, but the choice always is up to you what you want to do.
Well, all philosophies get challenged at the application level, right? I mean, we can sit around and wax philosophy with our caps and elbow patches and cigars, and yeah, we can philosophize. But really, you really challenge a philosophy when you begin to apply it, and that's something that I've learned. Kudos to you over the last 10 years. And
thank you.
The application of that has been the game changer. That's what's changed my life for the better, is taking the steps, making the tough decisions, moving, selling our practice, selling the gym, opening a new center, building a house, having kids, deciding all these things that would be in opposition to what would be the safe thing to do, simply because they were an extension of my values. And, we've gone through a lot of difficult changes at the Life by Design Center in the last year, with hirings and firings and changing business models and just lots of things. And all of them, you come face to face every day with difficult challenges and obstacles. And if you're going to let those things put you down and just stop and quit, then I'm never going to see and be able to reap the benefits and the rewards. And really, those people that will do that are the type of people and develop themselves into that type of person, because it's not something that necessarily you're born into. It's something you create. It's something that you build. And as you build yourself to be that person and make the choices that person would make, to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, to show up at the gym 4 days a week, to read the books, to spend the time with your family, to make the tough decisions, that's how you get the results. And if you get the results, along with that comes the emotional reward, which we would call happiness. So if you're looking for a blueprint, there it is. Go to the show notes, guys. You can check out all the things we talked about in today's episode at lifebydesign.com/podcast. And thank you for joining the drive to 1 million families worldwide living life by design.